This week's Parsha is Korach, and it's in the book of Bamidbar, and it is chapter 16, 17. It's talking about, and that's Numbers, chapter 16, 17. It's talking about the rebellion that occurred with Korach and his followers, challenging Moses for leadership, actually challenging Moses and Aaron. And it has them coming up. Korach is leading a group of followers that include 250 of the text tells us, some of the more noted and prestigious members of the community. And they come up to Moses and they basically say, what makes you so special? What is it about you that makes you the leader and the one that God talks to? I mean, aren't we all holy? Aren't we all part of this vision together? Isn't God equally revealing divine truth to all of us? Why would it be you? And it's an interesting question. Moses responds the way we would think he would respond, because the Torah has told us he's a very humble person. So basically he's shocked and falls on his face. I mean, how do you respond to that? And ultimately God is going to come in and God is going to respond to it. And this is the famous narrative we know, where the earth will open its mouth and swallow Korach and his followers. So the text itself we understand. But there's a number of questions that we have. And the first one is, what was wrong with the question? What was wrong with Korach coming up to Moses face to face and saying, why are you leader? We don't have a leadership system. So how is it that made you leader? And aren't we all holy? And isn't this supposed to be something that we're all engaged with? And essentially, there really isn't anything wrong with the question. But when we understand and look at it closely, we realize, how did he get 250 people to follow him in this little meeting? How did he actually put together 250 of the more famous, more noted people to come to Moses, if not to subversively go behind Moses' back and start to ask questions that are going to be divisive and that are going to be challenging? So the real question isn't that there was a problem confronting Moses. The real question was a question of process. When there's a challenge to leadership in Torah and in Judaism, what is the process? How is it that you're supposed to actually raise that question, which is a fair question? And the process that Korach engaged in had to be underhanded. It had to involve bad-mouthing Moses and challenging all of the authority of Moses behind his back in order to get 250. It's continuing with a theme that the Torah has introduced a couple of chapters ago, where it starts with the gossiping, the family gossiping of Miriam and Aaron. Then the spies tour the land of Israel and gossip about the land of Israel and badmouth the land of Israel. Now ultimately we have Korach coming up and badmouthing Moses. This is just something that grows and grows and grows, which is, I think, a true and consistent kind of rendering of how gossip spreads. But what I find to be the most powerful part of all of this is the resolution. The fact that the earth opens its mouth and is swallowing these people. Because it's such an unusual kind of visual, and it's such an unusual phrase. The earth opens her mouth and eats them. We think about it and we realize, isn't that interesting? That's kind of what the spies had said about the land of Israel. They came back and they reported and said, this is a land that eats its inhabitants. And we were aghast, we were offended that you could speak of a land that way. There is no greater betrayal of a land than to eat its inhabitants, because the land should be providing food for its inhabitants. It's supposed to work the other way around. We're supposed to eat from the land. It's not supposed to eat us. It's supposed to nurture us. So to have the spies speak of Israel that way, to now move forward and see that this is exactly what's going to happen to these people who are bad-mouthing God and Moses by saying there's something fishy going on here, that ultimately the land will open up and eat them, means that essentially they've written their own destiny. It creates this much larger message that we actually build the prisons we live in. We actually author our own destinies. And what we put out into the world is what then stays there to greet us as we move forward. This whole concept of a land eating its inhabitants wasn't there before the spies brought it in. So the spies themselves are the ones introducing this horrible concept. And they're introducing it by bad-mouthing something about the land of Israel, which now becomes real shortly thereafter and becomes the answer to Korach. It's an astounding message that not only are we supposed to be careful about the words we choose and the messages that we put about each other, but it's also about the concepts and words we put into the world, because then they're there and they're waiting for us, and eventually our destiny will lead us there. it's a tremendously powerful and chilling kind of statement that really, if the lesson is to be learned, it's to be learned right there.